This revenge story contains intense acts of retribution that may be excessive and could be disturbing to some viewers.
The sterile white of the hospital ceiling was a canvas for my fractured thoughts. Memories of that picnic, once a picture of domestic bliss, now felt like a mocking replay. Lucy had laid out everything with her usual precision: the gingham blanket, the crustless sandwiches, the steaming thermos of coffee. I remember the way she'd looked at me, her smile a touch too fixed, never quite reaching her eyes, like a performer on a stage. I should have seen it then, the carefully constructed facade. The official story, courtesy of the local police, was that I'd lost control of my car on that winding coastal road, careening off a cliff. An accident, they'd called it. But as I lay here, piecing together the shards of that day through a drug-induced haze, the image of Lucy's face, devoid of emotion, haunted me. It was like watching a marionette collapse, its strings cut clean. She hadn't just witnessed it, she'd orchestrated it. The picnic, the location, the coffee, it was all part of a twisted play, and I was the unfortunate lead, cast as the victim who wouldn't live to see the final act. I tried to make sense of it, the events before and after tumbling around in my mind like a malfunctioning dryer, full of mismatched socks and tangled threads. The last thing I recalled was the drowsy feeling that washed over me, thick and heavy as syrup, before the world dissolved into black. It wasn't fatigue. It was something else, something sinister. The coffee. It had tasted off, almost metallic, and I dismissed it as simply poor brewing. Now I knew better. A movement at the edge of my vision pulled me back to the sterile room. It was Lucy, her steps light as she approached my bed. Her face was a mask of concern, a picture of a distraught wife. "Oh, honey," she began, her voice trembling. "I am so relieved you are awake. How are you feeling?" I wanted to shout at her, scream about the metallic aftertaste in the coffee and the cold, detached look on her face. But I didn't. I played along, my mind racing, a storm brewing within. "I am confused," I said, my voice raspy. "What happened?" "The police said you fell asleep at the wheel, honey," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You swerved, they said, and the car went over the cliff. It's a miracle you are alive. Why would you be driving when you were so tired?" Her words were meant to be reassuring, but they were off, like a badly tuned instrument. It didn't fit what I remembered. I wasn't driving. I was at the picnic, watching Lucy, feeling that strange drowsiness creep over me. I knew with absolute certainty that I hadn't been behind the wheel when the car had plunged into the abyss. "I don't remember driving," I said, my brow furrowed. I thought I was at the picnic with you." A flicker of something crossed her face, a hint of panic, quickly masked by a look of concerned confusion. "Honey, you must be confused. The doctor said that you have some memory loss from the accident. We were on our way home and you told me that you wanted to take the scenic route. It's all so terribly frightening and sudden." She laid a gentle hand on my arm, but her touch felt cold and distant, not the warm, comforting touch of my wife. I knew she was lying. I knew she was trying to cover something up. "They said you are lucky to be alive. You are lucky that they were able to retrieve you from the wreckage so fast," she said. "You should have been dead, but they said that the firefighters arrived just in time." She was trying to convince me that this had been an accident, that it was not her fault. The forced smile, the careful words, they were too much. It felt too rehearsed. I remained silent, my thoughts swirling, the puzzle pieces not quite fitting together. She kept talking, her voice soft and caring, asking if I needed anything, if I had any pain, but I could only focus on the discrepancies in her story. If the police thought I was driving, and I knew that I was not driving, then who was behind the wheel? And where did I go? And why did she try to kill me? A nurse came in then, interrupting the conversation, announcing that I needed to have some rest, and she politely escorted her from the room. As she walked away, I watched her, my eyes narrowing with suspicion. Her performance had been excellent, but I knew what she was. She was a liar and a murderer. Later that day, 2 police officers came for a statement. They looked at me with polite but distant expressions, their eyes narrowed with suspicion, almost like they already knew what had happened. "So, Mr. Hayes," one of them began, his voice flat and official, "we understand you were involved in a single vehicle accident yesterday. Can you tell us what happened?" I swallowed hard, knowing that I couldn't reveal my suspicions just yet. Not here. Not with them. "I was tired, I guess," I said, mimicking their tone, my voice flat and controlled. "I must have fallen asleep at the wheel, lost control of the car. I don't really remember much after that." They exchanged a knowing look, jotting down notes on their clipboards, their faces betraying nothing. Their questions were standard, the usual routine. Did I have any drugs or alcohol in my system? Had I been driving erratically before? Did I have any witnesses to the accident? I answered them truthfully, sticking to the story of a tired driver falling asleep at the wheel. It was the safest route for now. I had to appear confused and disoriented, a victim of circumstance, so that they would underestimate me. I could sense the skepticism in their eyes, the unspoken questions, the lingering doubts. They clearly didn't buy it, but they had nothing concrete to prove that it was anything but an accident. As they left, a sense of foreboding settled over me, heavy and suffocating. I knew deep down that this was no accident. It was something deliberate, something planned, and I had been a target, a pawn in a twisted game. The hospital room, once a place of healing, now felt like a cage, trapping me in a web of lies. Days blurred into a monotonous routine of medical checkups and bland meals. But one afternoon, a welcome face appeared. Mark, a colleague from work. He was Lucy's colleague as well, and we got along reasonably well. He was a tall and jovial man, always ready with a joke, and his presence offered a much-needed break from the sterile monotony. "Hey, buddy," Mark boomed, a wide smile stretching across his face. "Heard you had a bit of a spill. Glad to see you are still in one piece." "Thanks, man," I replied, offering a weak smile. "It's been a bit of a roller coaster." Mark pulled up a chair, his jovial demeanor masking a hint of concern. "So, what happened?" "The police report said you drove your car off a cliff." "Damn, man, that's crazy. You gotta have been pretty tired, huh?" "Yeah, that's what I figured," I said, still following the party line. "Just overworked and tired, I guess." "Yeah, I get it," Mark said, shaking his head. "But honestly, the whole thing sounds a bit fishy. I mean, you are the most cautious guy I know. You falling asleep at the wheel and careening off a cliff? It's a bit out of character." He paused, leaning in conspiratorially, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "You know, when I heard about the accident, the first thing that popped into my head was, well, you know how Logan and Lucy have been getting a bit cozy lately?" I frowned, confused. "Cozy?" "Yeah, you know, all the after-work drinks, the late-night meetings. It's all the buzz around the office." "The rumor mill is working overtime," Mark said, his tone teasing, but with a note of seriousness lurking beneath the surface. "I even joked to some of the guys that maybe they wanted to get rid of you since you were no longer needed." A jolt ran through me, a sharp, cold realization. It was just a joke, a playful jab, but it unlocked something deep inside. It was like he had a key and just unlocked a door to my unconscious. Logan, her boss, the man I'd trusted, and my wife, the woman I loved, together? Mark continued, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. "I am just kidding, of course," he said, giving my arm a playful punch. "But seriously, man, you gotta be careful out there. The world is a crazy place." I forced a laugh, trying to play it cool, but my mind was racing. It was all starting to make sense. The pieces were falling into place. The metallic taste in the coffee, the forced smiles, the discrepancy in the story, the strange sense of unease I had felt since the accident. They had tried to kill me, and my own life was at stake. "Hey, Mark," I said, my voice casual. "I appreciate you stopping by, man. You know, just out of curiosity, could you keep an eye on things at work? You know, keep an eye on Lucy and Logan, see if they're, still cozy." Mark grinned, nodding. "Sure thing, buddy. Consider it done. I'll keep you updated. You just focus on getting better." A few days later, Mark sent me a series of photos, digital images of Lucy and Logan, sharing an intimate dinner at a fancy restaurant, holding hands, and entering a hotel, a seedy one, known for hourly rentals. The images were clear and undeniable, the betrayal as sharp as a blade. The blood rushed to my head, a furious rage boiling inside me. They thought they had gotten away with it, but they were wrong. They hadn't completely finished the job, and I was about to prove that they had made a big mistake by not finishing me off. Later that day, while reviewing my discharge paperwork, I stumbled upon a copy of my life insurance policy. My eyes widened as I scanned the document. Lucy was the sole beneficiary, with a payout so substantial it would set her up for life. And she didn't even have to worry about me anymore. The truth hit me like a physical blow, cold and hard. This wasn't just an attempt on my life. It was a calculated plan to erase me completely. A cold and cruel conspiracy designed to make her rich. And Logan was in on it. That much I knew. I clenched my fist under the sheets, the rage coursing through my veins, my mind flooded with images of their betrayal. They thought they had written the end of my story, but I was about to rewrite the whole thing. The rage that coursed through me was like a burning fire, and it was only the start. The hospital stay had given me time to gather my thoughts, to strategize and plan my next steps. As I lay in that bed, the anger and the betrayal fueled my desire for revenge, my mind becoming a dark and twisted landscape where logic and reason were replaced by a single-minded focus on inflicting suffering on those who had wronged me. I knew I couldn't confront Lucy and Logan directly. Not yet, at least. I needed allies, someone who shared my sense of injustice, someone who had a good reason to hate them as much as I did. That's when I thought of Natalie. Reaching out to her felt like a long shot, but it was a risk I was willing to take. I used a burner phone, an untraceable number, making sure there was no way that Logan could trace our communications. I suggested that we meet at a quiet cafe, away from our usual social circles, a place where we could speak freely. It felt strange, like a clandestine meeting in a spy thriller, but I didn't care. I had to do this, even if she was the last person I wanted to ask for help. We agreed on a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop on the edge of town. It was quiet and unassuming, a place where we could plan without fear of being overheard. I arrived a few minutes early, choosing a corner table where I could keep an eye on the door. A few minutes later, she walked in, and I immediately recognized her from company events. Natalie, Logan's wife. She was taller than I remembered, with striking features, a confident demeanor, and an undeniable presence. Even in jeans and a simple blouse, she exuded an air of sophisticated elegance that I hadn't expected. She moved with an air of quiet authority, her composure a carefully constructed mask, and I could sense a strength and determination beneath the surface. I had never really spoken to her before, but I knew that she was the only one who could help me. She approached the table, her expression calm but watchful, as if she was evaluating me. "Mr. Hayes?" she asked, her voice low and steady, with a hint of caution. "Please, call me David," I responded, offering a small, almost nervous smile. I gestured to the seat opposite me. "Thank you for coming, Miss Natalie." "Natalie is fine," she replied, taking the seat. She placed her bag on the floor and leaned back, giving me her full attention. She seemed composed and ready to listen. I wondered what she thought of me, and whether she had any idea about what was going to happen. I took a deep breath, trying to choose the right words, not wanting to come off as crazy, but also to show my anger. I began my story, recounting the events of that day in meticulous detail, starting with the strange taste of the coffee at the picnic and the events that followed. I described Lucy's forced smiles, the way the police had dismissed my concerns, the discovery of the life insurance policy, the photos of her and Logan. I told her everything, making sure she understood the full extent of the betrayal. As I spoke, I watched her face, looking for a sign that she was understanding what I was saying, trying to see if she felt as angry as I was feeling. I noticed the subtle shifts in her expression, the almost imperceptible clenching of her jaw, her eyes darkening with each passing detail, mirroring the anger that I also felt. I wanted her to feel the rage that was coursing through my veins. I wanted her to feel the desperation and the hurt. When I had finished, she sat in silence for a long moment, her gaze fixed on her reflection in the window. I could see her taking in what I had just told her, and I could tell that she was shocked, but she was also angry and she was determined to take action. I suspected something was wrong, she finally said, her voice low and steady, a rumble of suppressed anger that I knew all too well. He's been distant, secretive, always on his phone. I've seen him with Lucy late at night when he thought I was asleep. But this is beyond anything I could have ever imagined, she admitted, her voice shaking, a mix of disbelief and rage. Her eyes were no longer calm and collected. There was a spark of anger in them, and I knew then that we were on the same side. I leaned forward, lowering my voice to a near whisper, the intensity of my feelings clearly evident. I want to make them pay, I said. The words weighted with the full force of my resolve. But I can't do it alone. Will you help me? She didn't hesitate, her answer immediate and unwavering. Yes, she replied, her voice as cold as ice, locking eyes with mine. And for the first time, I saw the hatred in her eyes. They'll regret crossing us. We were partners now, bound by a shared sense of betrayal. Our desire for revenge creating a dark and twisted alliance. A union forged in the ashes of our broken lives. I looked at her, and I knew that she was as angry as I was. And I knew that she was just as willing to do whatever it took to make them pay. Natalie and I spent weeks meticulously planning our revenge, each of us playing a crucial part in crafting the perfect storm of retribution, a carefully choreographed dance of destruction. We were not impulsive, we were methodical, like chess players carefully considering each move before making it, analyzing every possibility before setting our plan into motion. We decided to hit them where it would hurt the most, their health and their lives, not through a quick, violent act that would quickly end their suffering, but through a slow, agonizing decline that would give us maximum satisfaction. The aim was not to kill, not initially at least, but to make them suffer, to make them feel the same fear, the same sense of helplessness that I had felt on that day by the cliffs, to force them to experience the same pain that they had inflicted on me. I started with Lucy, the one who had betrayed me most intimately, the woman I had once called my wife, the one who I had loved, and now hated with all the intensity that I had felt for her. I slipped small doses of poison, a tasteless, odorless substance that I had carefully sourced online, an untraceable compound that would do the job, into her coffee, her shampoo, even her favorite snacks, everyday items that she used on a daily basis without suspicion. It was a slow, methodical approach, a game of patience, a carefully choreographed dance of deception that would slowly unravel her life. At first, she didn't notice, her body slowly adapting to the subtle changes, the first effects of the poison barely registering on her system. But soon, the symptoms began to manifest, like a slow-acting disease that would slowly claim its victim. She started complaining of headaches, debilitating migraines that would keep her in bed for days, each attack more severe than the last, every day becoming a living nightmare. She had bouts of nausea, her stomach churning with an unsettling queasiness that would not subside, an ongoing illness that was slowly draining the life out of her. She grew tired, always tired, her energy levels plummeting to the point where she could barely function. Every action requiring a monumental effort, her body betraying her at every turn. She went to the doctors seeking answers for her mysterious symptoms, but they found nothing wrong, chalking her illness up to stress and anxiety, dismissing her complaints as nothing more than a mental problem. I watched from the sidelines, a grim satisfaction washing over me as I saw the slow, agonizing decline of the woman who had once shared my bed, the woman who had been my partner. Anger mixed with a dark, cold satisfaction, like a twisted cocktail of justice, a feeling that gave me a perverse pleasure. It was as if I was watching her dissolve before my eyes, slowly fading away like a ghost in the night. Meanwhile, Natalie, equally ruthless and determined, took care of Logan, her methods as methodical as mine. She mixed the same poison into his drinks at home, subtly tampering with his water bottles at work, his protein shakes at the gym, even his nightly cup of tea, turning his everyday routines into a potential threat. She became a master of deception, making sure her actions were never suspicious, her methods always subtle and untraceable, blending her plots with the background of his life. He began showing the same symptoms as Lucy, their bodies both succumbing to the same poison, like twin victims of a carefully planned curse. Constant fatigue, skin rashes, and stomach pains, his physical and mental state slowly deteriorating with each passing day, making him weaker and weaker. His once sharp and powerful mind became clouded and confused, his thoughts becoming a jumbled mess, his ability to reason slowly fading away. He tried to brush it off, attributing his symptoms to overwork and stress. But it was clear that he was suffering, that he was breaking down from the inside, that his arrogance was slowly being replaced with desperation. I remember the day that Lucy finally confronted me, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and fear, a look of desperation I had never seen before. "I don't know what's wrong with me," she said, her voice trembling. A fragile whisper of a once confident woman, her strength fading away with each passing moment. "I feel like I am falling apart, like my body is betraying me, like I am turning into something unrecognizable," she confessed, her fear palpable. I forced a sympathetic smile, carefully masking the dark satisfaction that was bubbling up inside me, hiding the terrible truth behind a mask of concern. "Maybe it's stress," I said, my voice gentle, comforting, as if I was trying to calm a scared child, all while knowing what I was doing to her. "You should take it easy. Maybe have a day off. Try to relax," I added, trying to deceive her with a carefully crafted lie. She nodded, her gaze unfocused, but I could see the fear in her eyes, the dawning awareness that something was terribly wrong, that her body was not simply failing her, but that something was actively working against her. She had no clue what was coming, the terrible reality of the poison slowly eating away at her body, and in that moment, I felt no pity for her at all. She deserved everything she was getting. It was what she deserved, and I was determined to make sure she got it. The poison was only the first step in our plan, a subtle reminder of what had been done to me, a prelude to the real punishment that was just beginning, the start of the terrible suffering that they had earned. As their health continued to worsen, their bodies slowly succumbing to the effects of the poison, Natalie and I decided that it was time to escalate our campaign of revenge. It was time to move to the next phase of our plan. We had successfully undermined their physical well-being. Now it was time to target their livelihoods, their social standing, and their sense of security, to dismantle their lives piece by piece. It was time to take everything away from them, to reduce them to nothing, to completely and utterly destroy everything that they held dear. We spread rumors online, using anonymous accounts and carefully crafted fake news stories, designed to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of Logan's customers and clients, to undermine their trust in him and his company. We said that Logan's company was selling contaminated products, that his manufacturing process was unsafe, that his business practices were unethical, and that his employees were being mistreated. We made it sound real, detailed, and terrifying, adding just enough truth to make it believable, creating a web of lies that looked like reality. The accusations spread like wildfire, quickly going viral, amplified by the echo chambers of social media and the public demand for answers and retributions. Soon, customers were demanding refunds, suppliers began to cut ties, and the company's stock plummeted. The value of the business collapsing like a house of cards in a storm, destroying everything he had worked for. Logan, once a powerful and arrogant executive, was now in way over his head, his company teetering on the brink of collapse, his reputation tarnished beyond repair, his life starting to unravel around him. He was scrambling to contain the damage, trying to put out the fires that were rapidly consuming his business empire. But he couldn't figure out what was happening. He couldn't see the invisible hand that was guiding his downfall, the orchestrator of his demise. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines, my heart filled with a cold and dark satisfaction, a sense of power I had never experienced before, a feeling of dominance over my enemies. I felt like a conductor leading a symphony of chaos, each note, each carefully planned detail contributing to the overall destruction, a feeling of righteous anger mixed with a touch of something far darker. I remember the day that Natalie finally filed for divorce, the moment that her patience had finally run out. It was a meticulously planned move, timed to perfection to inflict maximum damage on Logan, a final act of betrayal that would break his spirit completely. She walked into his office, her face a mask of cold, unrelenting determination, her eyes devoid of any emotion, an expression of pure, unadulterated hatred. "It's over," she said, her voice flat and devoid of any warmth, slamming the divorce papers on his desk with a sharp, decisive sound, a final nail in the coffin of his happiness. "I am taking everything," she added, her words weighted with intent, as if she was proclaiming her victory to the world. Logan stared at her, his face pale and drawn, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief, as if he could not comprehend what was happening, that his carefully crafted life was falling apart in front of his very eyes. "You can't do this," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper, a desperate plea from a broken man, a last cry for mercy that would fall on deaf ears. "Oh, I can, and I will," she replied, her voice like ice, cold, sharp, and unforgiving, a clear and confident statement of her power. "Watch me." And she did, proceeding to strip him of all his assets, his money, his possessions, taking everything away from him, piece by piece. The house, the savings, the investments, even his damn car, it all belonged to her now, every single thing that he had worked for. Logan was left with nothing but a mountain of debt, a failing business, and the crushing realization that everything he had worked for was now gone, reduced to ashes by the woman he had betrayed, a painful realization that would finally sink in. It was poetic justice, a perfect mirror of what he had tried to do to me, a taste of his own medicine, but this time he was the one being forced to swallow it, as he was the one who was being reduced to nothing. The sight of his despair, his helplessness, his complete and utter destruction, filled me with a sense of deep, dark satisfaction, as if a burning thirst had finally been quenched, like a long-awaited victory against a hated enemy. It was a taste of things to come, a preview of the suffering that awaited both Lucy and Logan, a glimpse into the abyss that they had earned for themselves. Lucy and Logan were now mere shadows of their former selves, their bodies ravaged by the relentless poison, their lives completely consumed by despair, their past happiness a long-forgotten memory. They had become the very things they had tried to make me, broken, alone, and utterly miserable, victims of their own cruel and selfish actions. They had tried to destroy me, but now they were the ones being destroyed, their lives a twisted mirror image of the pain and suffering that they had inflicted on me. The poison had taken its toll, leaving them weak, paranoid, and consumed by a sense of dread, their minds and bodies slowly succumbing to its effects. Lucy barely left the house, her health having deteriorated to the point where she could barely function, her physical state a testament to the slow and agonizing effects of the poison. She had become a prisoner in her own home, her mind and body slowly failing, haunted by an invisible enemy she could not name or see, the poison slowly consuming her body from the inside out. She would jump at every sound and look at every shadow, her senses heightened by the fear of the unknown, the paranoia making her terrified of her own surroundings. Her once beautiful face was now pale and drawn, her eyes filled with fear and confusion, the light of her life slowly fading away as she was consumed by her own personal hell. Every day was a struggle for her, a torment of constant pain and unease, her body betraying her at every turn, the poison making her feel worse and worse with each passing moment. She sought answers, consulting every doctor she could find, but none could find the source of her illness, dismissing her fears and concerns as the ramblings of a sick and troubled mind. Logan, on the other hand, was completely defeated, reduced to a shell of his former self, his once confident and arrogant demeanor replaced by a look of despair and hopelessness. Once a powerful and arrogant man, he was now a broken, impoverished shell, living in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, struggling to survive, his days filled with a desperate search for some form of redemption. He was drowning in debt and despair, his business ruined, his reputation tarnished, his life in complete disarray, his future as bleak as his present. He spent his days scrambling to find work, making desperate attempts to salvage his company, but it was all for nothing, his efforts as futile as trying to build a sandcastle in the middle of a hurricane. The damage was done, the destruction was complete, and there was no turning back, no escape from the suffering that awaited him. He had lost everything he valued: his money, his status, his power, his sense of self, his whole existence reduced to nothing, a ghost in the machine of life. He was completely isolated, abandoned by his friends, his family, his colleagues. Everyone had turned their back on him, disgusted and repulsed by his behavior. Natalie and I had made sure of that, systematically cutting off all his ties to the outside world, leaving him alone with his despair and to deal with the consequences of his actions. They were completely isolated now, left to wallow in their own misery, their suffering serving as a twisted form of justice, a clear and painful reminder of the fate they had chosen for themselves. I watched from the sidelines, savoring every moment of their despair, my heart growing darker with each passing day, the darkness inside me slowly taking over my personality. They had tried to destroy me, but they had failed, and now I was watching them as they fell into their own abyss. Now, they were the ones broken and alone, their lives reduced to a wasteland of pain, fear, and regret, and I had been the one who had led them to this moment. They had tried to take me out, but now I was standing over them, and in my cold heart, I didn't feel the remorse, or even a single shred of pity for their suffering. This was what they deserved, and I was willing to give it to them.